Our Washington correspondent, Kethevane Gorjestani. Kethevane, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit more about President Biden's agenda, his priorities on this visit to Poland today?
Well, there are two major stops for today on the president's agenda. The first one being, of course, the one we just saw, which is the president of the United States meeting with U.S. soldiers, the 82nd Airborne Division, to be specific. And as we heard in that speech, of course, the main goal there was to thank them for their service. But it's also a larger symbolic move to go there. It's also to show how the U.S. is positioned on that NATO eastern flank, how much the U.S. supports NATO, supports the eastern flank, and to reassure Poland, which is, of course, one of the countries on that so-called front line of that eastern flank facing Russia if something were to happen. And so the fact that he was meeting with these troops was also a way to shine a light, to show the images of that U.S. presence, of that U.S. support to Poland and to NATO's eastern flank in general. The second main stop of the day is going to be a briefing on the humanitarian situation, because Poland is not only at the forefront of the military positioning, but it's also taking and bearing the brunt of that humanitarian crisis with all those Ukrainian refugees crossing over into Poland, searching for comfort, for security. And so there's going to be a briefing for the U.S. president about that situation, about what Poland needs, about what other Eastern European nations that are really bringing in those refugees need, and the U.S. Also earlier announcing that it would be taking in about 100,000 Ukrainian refugees in the United States over the next few months to help a little bit with that situation.
And Kethevane, more globally, when it comes to the US position on this war, the implication of President Biden himself, how is that being received in Washington?
Well, there has been a sort of shift as this war has been going on. Initially, there was a sort of bipartisan support and unity with the president to face Russia. There was unity on what sanctions to take. There was unity on the fact that the U.S. needed to help the Europeans, needed to help Ukraine militarily, humanitarianly, and financially. But as this invasion and this war has continued, you're seeing a little bit of a shift, whether it's here in Washington, but also in the United States as a whole. There's actually been a couple of polls that have come out in the past 24 hours showing that now there is actually a majority of Americans who believe that President Biden is not doing enough to support Ukraine and not being tough enough on Russia. The question is exactly what Americans would like the president to do, because they also don't feel like the U.S. should get into an all-out war with Russia. But the overwhelming feeling is that maybe the United States could do a little bit more, and we've seen that push mostly from the Republican side, whether it's among the population or among politicians, especially in Congress. They were the ones who were pushing for earlier sanctions, for tougher sanctions, for more help for the Ukrainians, and that's really the sort of shift that you've been seeing. But overall, there is agreement here in the United States, whatever political party you support, on the fact that Ukrainians need help and that the U.S. needs to be united with its allies against Russia.
Kethevane Gorjestani there reporting for us from Washington. Thank you very much.